All right, here we are. Welcome to Voyager, please, a live stream edition. I named it Trek Deep Dives, but of course, uh, Peter had better idea right away. So it's the way it is. My name is Joseph,
I'm Peter.
and thank you to those of you who are joining us. Peter and I, we really enjoy doing the podcast and talking for an hour, sometimes an hour and 20 or hour and 30 minutes about given episodes of Voyager, but sometimes we also want to explore more in depth the shit that we would be able to go on for hours more and talk to our audience, see what their hot takes are, and explore our nerdery in even greater depth. Because an hour-long podcast about episodes from a 23-year-old television show just isn't fucking enough for us. So we've got a few ideas here. Hopefully, as people filter in, start watching, they'll have their own. We look forward to it. We are gonna still do an end of season live stream like we did for season 1, where we give our season awards away.
One of the seasonal rips.
I still want to put a contender out there for one award though to start us off.
All right, let's hear it.
My favorite award that we did was weakest shit. Because I think
well deserved.
Voyager has a lot of weak shit in it.
What was your weakest shit for last season?
What was my weakest shit for last season? It had to be something from The Cloud, because that was the most miserable ass episode we watched.
My weakest shit, and I still stand by it, was the end of Jatrol, where Janeway throws in the most half-ass effort to save the entire population of Talaxian moon possible before they just scoot off after a good 4 minutes of trying.
And it almost worked. They had the guy half materialized. They all saw it almost worked. They're like, this isn't really going to work out for us. We're going to have to go and save millions of people who were eradicated by a space nuke.
Mm-hmm.
But the weakest shit this season is got to be from Twisted, when Harry Kim is sitting in the Primogen Council meeting on the holodeck and says, "Who would want to attack us? What have we possibly done in the Delta Quadrant that someone would be angry?" Like, every single alien race that they have run into has beef with them. All of them. Every single one. Everyone they've met is going to want to kill them.
Yep.
What fucking show have you been on, Harry?
It's the most obvious answer to the most painful question possible.
I'm curious if Threshold or delay of Threshold will bring us to a point where there's something that can beat that moment. But that's my contender so far. I just needed to share that. So Harry Kim is my weakest shit.
Oh, so you're not doing that scene in that question specifically. You're going right for the throat. Hey, I think we got a tech problem here in that it's only showing me instead of whoever's currently talking.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Thank you. We'll see if we can fix that.
Yeah.
How about now?
I'm not seeing your face on the... Well, I don't know if I'm even seeing the current thing on YouTube here. Sorry, guys, a little bit of technical difficulties here.
I think that fixed. Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. I mean, not that I think anyone would mind staring at Peter on his laptop.
I'm tired of this.
So we have a few topics to start with. I think the one you were really pumped about doing was Irredeemable Evil Women in Seska. Like, you had a hot take already for that, and I'm ready to absorb it if you're ready to provide it.
It's a big deal for me. Equality in film and stuff is a big deal, and TV shows and stuff like that. And, they, especially with like Black Panther, right? Mm-hmm. Trying to put out more minorities in the mainstream, inclusiveness and all that other stuff. And to me, it's not about where can you fit a minority protagonist in. It's where can you be strong enough and bold enough to put a minority antagonist in. Because in my mind, that's where the real, the real meat on the bone is in any sort of work. It's the villain who drives the plot and really makes things happen. And there's only so far you can go with any given protagonist. I personally find, Prince T'Challa or whatever his name was in Black Panther very boring.
Agreed, and I completely agree. Killmonger was more entertaining. I'd even go as far as to say that the Spider-Man movie, Homecoming, was incredibly elevated by the fact that they created a villain for that was very compelling,
Absolutely.
more compelling than Parker.
I mean, if we're going to talk about Marvel for a minute here, I think that's been the Achilles heel for the Marvel cinematic universe. Has been very, very weak villains, with the exception of like Loki.
Right.
But obviously, they've put a lot of attention into it, and I think it's grown a lot. But so when we get into the realm of women in film and women as villains, it is extremely rare to find a attractive female villain who is evil to the end, instead of falling under the spell of the good guys in the third act, and redeeming themselves and doing this heel face switch, and coming out of all of it one of the good guys. Now 2017 was a great year for this, because you had Helena from Thor Ragnarok, who was an attractive, just irredeemably bad villain.
I would like to point out that you have once again mispronounced something. You said Helena. It's Hella. Preview for Thursday, I finally call Peter out on the fact he can never pronounce anything correctly, and that he infects me with this evil contagion of bad pronunciation of names and not remembering things. But continue. Go ahead.
I don't care about MCU ultimately, so whatever. But so 2017 is, I'm sorry, there's a step further to this with this women thing too, is not only is it hard to have an irredeemable, attractive woman, but to actually be so bold as to kill one by the end of it is even more rare.
True.
So again, 2017, you had the character from Thor Ragnarok, and then you had Love from Blade Runner 2049.
Oof, yeah. She was a cold bitch.
Yeah, I mean, give me anybody else that you can think of out there that is a evil, irredeemable, competent female villain, or any that end up dying on the evil throne instead of ultimately switching back over to good.
Or is evil for like evil reasons, not like I was spurned and I'm just angry. Like there's like some compelling, competent evil.
Yeah,
and Seska is definitely like, she's a spy. She's out for herself. She wants to survive, and she's going to do the things that a trained Obsidian Order agent feel is appropriate to do that, and not going to give a fuck.
Yeah, she's willing
about
to
anything
kill.
else.
So seeing her in this role from, what would we say, 20 some years ago at this
23
point?
years ago, yeah.
Real big deal, and it's been really refreshing, and I was very excited to see her move the character in the direction that they have with it, because it's just such a rare commodity out there, and I think it's a pretty big honor for the showrunners to give a very strong actress like her to run with and do some real justice to the world of villainy.
Let me segue into Star Trek villains kind of in general. When I think back of Berman era Trek, persistent antagonists are relatively rare. DS9 has the most of that. Gul Dukat, the Wayun, and the female changeling, and you look at TNG. I mean, there was basically just one, the Commander Tomalak. Like it's Star Trek doesn't typically do a lot of that. Like DS9 was where it happened. Didn't happen on Enterprise. Didn't happen on TNG. And as far as Voyager is concerned, as you were going to see, it's kind of hit or miss. Kind of, it's there. There's a little bit there, especially the Borg.
You got the Borg Queen, who obviously a movie property.
If she shows up, I'm not going to spoil anything else, but they use her as a character in Voyager.
I will throw Sela, Tasha Yar's half Romulan daughter, on the pile.
Yeah, she has like a few episodes.
And let's throw the Duras sisters in there. And even though they're not going to be, conventionally attractive, it's obviously, good-looking women under all the prosthetics. And as far as Klingons go, I think they're pretty attractive. but they're also irredeemably evil.
You mean the Duras sisters that destroyed the Enterprise D?
Yeah, and that's a pretty big feather in their cap. That's 7 years of gods and space monsters and whatever else out trying to blow up the Enterprise D, and in the end, it's two ladies with cleavage cutouts in their chest armor that took them down.
And they're broke down like terrible bird of prey that can't stay cloaked. Yeah, destroy the Enterprise D. Yeah, does that still sting you on a personal level?
That they took out the Enterprise D? No, what always made me mad about the destruction of the Enterprise D was that Troy just slammed the saucer section into that planet was, and I know that there's very clear like flow pattern of how to bring the saucer down. I've got the technical manual. It's packed away somewhere. Otherwise, I'd go right to the page and hold it up for the camera for everybody to see. It's been documented. She did not follow the instructions.
You let the lady drive.
Yeah.
You get what you deserve. I can't take it back either. I can't edit that out. So we've got notes here. I'm looking over at my other screen because I'm looking at the notes we wrote of stuff that we want to talk about. And you've got here, Peter, what would New Jack Neelix do? WWNJN. Please explain. Please explain.
I don't know what it was like. God, when did that even come out? Those little bracelets. I want to say it was high school for me, so pre-2000. They had the little bracelets with lettering on it. It said WWJD, which was what would Jesus do, which is boring. I think the real question is, what would New Jack Neelix do? And I think maybe for my birthday or Christmas, I'll have Casey make me a little bangle that has WWNJND, and I think that'll really boost my street crack rock.
Oh yeah,
selling business, and really boost that supplemental income.
You have to start to think of like, how would some of the other situations Voyager dealt with been handled differently if New Jack Neelix had made a more consistent appearance? Like, what if that coat didn't just come out for crack rock runs, but came out on the regular? Like when they're dealing with the Vidians, how would have New Jack Neelix dealt with getting his lungs stolen? Would he have gotten handy with his Glock? Like, how would that have played out?
Since we're running low on rules of acquisition for the Ferengi, maybe I need to make like New Jack Neelix's Guide to the Streets. And the first rule of New Jack Neelix will be get paid, followed by, I don't know, fuck bitches, or maybe I'll do that if things get slow at work. I'll make the Bible to New Jack Neelix.
That is, kidding aside, he should have been like that character. Like, Neelix should have been the quote-unquote street smart Delta Quadrant trader. That would have been so much more compelling than this annoying space snarf, this filthy space cat with his unlicensed hobo kitchen. Like, somebody who's out there on the fringe and is like, you pampered guys do not understand what it's like surviving on the ass end of the Delta Quadrant. And you got to be hard out here to survive. And could have been like this voice that was somewhat opposed to the Federation way of doing business, but is like slowly won over by their optimism. Instead, we get like a little bit of initial cowardice, and then he's just a company man from that point forward.
Well, here's a question. If we want to put some depth when probably there's no depth there to be had, was the glimpse of New Jack Neelix we got the real Neelix, and the singing, dancing space cat that we get on a regular basis, like a public front, just so he can continue to enjoy his free ride on the most lavish ship in the Delta Quadrant? Because keep in mind, pretty early in our relationship with Neelix, he's pulling phasers out of nowhere, causing unneeded duress with the Kazon and shooting up their water supply before they beam out. Like, he has a very large capacity to be a real POS, and I like it. Speaking of Neelix, the actor who I've had the pleasure of sitting through the panel at DragonCon, I just caught him. He's got a little role on Better Call Saul.
No kidding.
Yeah, he's a lawyer and eating a salad in most of his scenes, which I thought was very reminiscent of Neelix.
Well, I mean, if only it's got like, what's it, Angorian like tub root or whatever, it just like tastes like ass.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one piece of his cooking continuity is he's got this root, Lenora root. It
Yes,
fucking puts in everything, and it's like terrible.
not to be confused with the apple that makes your dick fall off.
Or the cheese that kills everybody.
Yeah,
That caused everyone to be sterilized after they heated the ship so that they could not die.
you
I
had a
didn't tell
call
it.
for questions out there, and Jason chimed in with one asking you about merch, which obviously we are certainly not in a stage to do yet. But I was thinking like cheeky ideas, and I think some good merch for us would be the stickers they hang up in bathrooms that says "Employees must wash hands," saying, Talaxians are not to wash hands before returning to work, or something about safety gloves in food prep areas are forbidden.
Or it's like you must wash hands, especially you, Talaxian.
But he
Something
doesn't.
that's
I mean, I think it's a part of the ship's culture. Is everybody's just okay with Neelix touching his face and his mouth and his nose, and then like going back into mixing mashed potatoes by hand.
oof, God, it's just so nasty now that you. Ever since you first pointed it out, I'm looking forward in every scene. Stevie and I, it's like, oh, it's a food prep scene. Let's see what happens here.
Yeah,
Let's
where
see
where
what
those fingers
goes
going?
down. Oh God.
I think now would be a
Speaking
good
of,
time.
go ahead.
I think now we've got two of our conversation topics out on the table. If anybody out in our the chat on this has anything you'd like to see us steer the conversation into, go ahead and throw it up in chat. We'll be happy to bounce
Oh
on it
yeah.
a little bit.
Please participate. There's at least 8 or 9 of you, which is 50% higher than our last live stream. So top notch. And let us know what you think, what you'd like to talk about, whatever your ideas are for discussion topics. We'd love to see that. I do have something that I forgot to include in our notes that I wanted to mention. So this is the most Star Trek Stevie's ever watched, like consistently. We've watched intermittent episodes of original series, TNG, and that sort of thing. But she's been along on the journey with me for almost every episode of Voyager so far. And she has gone down, she's a rabbit hole person. And she has found one. She found the mother lode of bad Star Trek fan fiction.
Ooh, that's a very deep and very, very wide hole.
Yes, it is. Especially when you start to read erotic Vulcan fan fiction. Because it's like once you start to see the bad stuff, you want to see how bad it can really get. And one of her great joys in life has been to find like the worst fan fiction and then share it with me because we're married and I can't get away. So she can infect me with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can see. Yeah, you can see it right there. You see it in her eyes. And yeah, she found some winners of self-insert erotic Vulcan fan fiction
Oh God.
that she then started to relate to me in detail while we're in the car. So I have just no escape whatsoever. There's nothing I can do. And it's fucking bad, dude.
Can you read an excerpt here or what?
Well, I didn't want to do that, but I will say that I think I knew that fic was going to be bad when the writer didn't understand that the 24th century didn't have poor people in it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's like she was pointing out all the shitty dialogue and the way that like this person is supposed to be portrayed as a total Mary Sue, which of course started with Star Trek fan fiction, all this other stuff. But my hang up was that she was basically from the wrong side of the streets because she grew up poor. And I was like, no, then this person doesn't understand Star Trek. There's no money in the 24th century. Deny. We're done here. I was trying to escape. I was trying to get out of the conversation. It was too late. No, she wanted to tell me more. I'm a broken man now, Peter.
Because I've got something that'll be very relevant to this conversation we're having here. This is a crappy lower resolution version of it, but it's something I've got hanging up in my office at work on the wall because it's that important, and it's going to hit square in the wheelhouse of what kind of danger zone Stevie's trying to crawl into here.
Okay.
Remove any web addresses and try it again. Why is it not letting me post this thing?
Do you have screen share?
Can we do that? Is that a
Yeah.
thing that can happen?
Mhm.
All right. Well,
It should
just
be on your
ignore all
Google
my
Hangouts.
illegal pornography you guys are about to see here. Q&A showcase screen share. Application window.
This is some compelling radio.
Yeah, this is
good.
really good, and it's going to be even better for everybody who's in the podcast. Listen to this on Thursday. All right, here we go. Is that coming up correctly?
Oh yeah, it is.
So that's a rundown of the geek hierarchy and all the bad things you can run into there. And you want to go ahead and read the worst thing, the furthest down on the list?
People who write erotic Star Trek. Oh God, it keeps going away every time I start talking. So you'll have to read it, Peter.
I'll go ahead and read it for you guys. People who write erotic versions of Star Trek where all the characters are furries, like Kirk is an ocelot or something, and then they put a furry version of themselves as the star of the story.
That is surprisingly close to what she found. Like, the it's like this Vulcan who keeps staring at this woman's ass, and then there's like all this dialogue about like the Ponfar. Oh, Stevie really got into the Ponfar. Like she read like the memory alpha, the memory beta, and the memory gamma on the Ponfar.
What's memory gamma?
Memory gamma is the wiki for Star Trek fan fiction.
That needs to be burned down with fire right now. If anybody out there has any work on memory gamma, I'm sorry for any significant others that you are inhabiting a house with, because that's vicious.
Jackie asked us where Cardassian Holloway went, and it never left our hearts, Jackie. I want to be clear. We mourn for the loss of Cardassian Holloway, which, of course, Jack spoiled for us is not actually a Cardassian Holloway. It's actually Star Trek V Holloway. But it's Cardassian Holloway in our hearts. Let's see here. There's such awful things on the internet. Can you share these sites with the loyal fans that they should be avoiding? As far as like places not to go if you want to avoid fan fiction, like,
I'm going to tell you right now, I couldn't even tell you where I would want to go to find slash fiction if I mean, other than Google or, it's funny because Bing, Microsoft's product, is always fighting to try and get more shares in that search space. So things that Google a long time ago said, no, we're going to block these things from hitting hits, specifically porn, Bing just embraces with both arms. It just pulls, full clips of porn right up in there. It's a very good porn search engine. I can tell you from personal experience. But I'm guessing they've probably got a very robust slash fic well that they draw from on that as well.
Yeah, so I mean, from fanfiction.net to Tumblr, I mean, it's everywhere, dude. You just don't go on the internet if you don't want to run into it. Literally, the original fanfiction was Star Trek fanfiction. It's kind of where the whole cottage industry started. The term Mary Sue comes from a Star Trek fanfiction, I think from the 70s. So it's a dark path to go down, and the fact that Stevie has started to go down it is given.
Yeah, but going back to that,
I've lost weight not because of eating better or working out, but because of the sheer terror I live in. Has just caused that much stress in my life.
It's like bulimia. She just reads you this stuff and you throw up, and
I just start vomiting, just wildly vomiting. What else do we got here? So, the Prime Directive. So, all right, we've hit on this a lot. Go ahead and intro your idea here.
I think that the Prime Directive issue that I keep running into and that we keep running into, it's similar to the Force and the Jedi. Like, what is the Force? What are the Jedi? What is Jedi-like behavior? How does the Force work exactly? You start looking at like role-playing games like the old D6 product that West End Games had released back in the 80s for Star Wars, where or maybe it was the D21 where mild feats of telekinetics to open and close doors, like basically sacrifice hit points and all the stuff. That's
Yeah,
like if you
that
hold
was
this,
the West End
if
communities.
you hold the mechanical system up to the movies, you're like, well, how is Obi-Wan Kenobi not completely passed out after just a day of being a Jedi? These rigid mechanical systems, these rigid rules do not hold up when you start filling in the stories that you are telling. And I think it's because the greatest resource document that all these starship captains and the shows can really revolve around at times was never really written out. There's not an actual prime directive out there where they can, the show writers can sit down and say, all right, well, technically, this is the way this should play out here. And the steadfast belief that all these characters should have, here it is, it's uniform and everybody's on the same page. It's just this vague thing that they can, bring up in a plot as that episode finds it convenient. And I think if you were going to have a science fiction or a fantasy show that is going to have some sort of a overriding document that touches all aspects of this show's plots, I think you'd be best served by just sitting down and hashing that thing out and making sure that you understood it inside and out. And then, you've got this device to run all these legal court episodes and all the other stuff it comes into, instead of the half-ass hodgepodge that, we see so often out of Star Trek.
I think part of the problem with how it came to be the way that it is that one group of writers probably did hash it out that way and had it in their series Bible that way.
Mhm.
And the next group of writers took that very same information and then just interpreted it differently. And then we see the impact of that. Like, what is the prime directive? It's not interfering in the progress of other cultures, right?
Sometimes.
And what does that mean?
Mhm.
That means something entirely different to Picard than it does to Janeway. It means something entirely to the writers of TNG than it does to the writers of Voyager. I remember freaking Bill Shatner himself got in an argument with who's the guy, Bill Maher, over the Prime Directive. I watched it. I was like, what it meant. Because Bill Maher thought it was, simply never helping anybody. And then Shatner had to correct him to say, no, it's not that you can't render aid, it's that you can't interfere with the natural progress. Like, he just rattled off this immediate, like, super high level Trek nerd explanation of why Bill Maher had it incorrect, which shouldn't surprise me. I guess that
good on Bill.
That Bill knows that. But everybody can interpret the same idea just a little bit differently on what is interference. There's a whole episode of Enterprise where they try to, I guess, explore the genesis of that rule of why the Prime Directive came to be. And it only made it worse, in my opinion. So they never figure this out on any Star Trek show in a way that is consistent across all of Trek. They try to apply a certain interpretation of it within the show, but in Voyager specifically, they never actually manage to find an interpretation that sticks.
I want to, while we're talking about Prime Directive in relation to Voyager, obviously we're very harsh towards Janeway for what she did in Caretaker and whatever, but how much of a stickler she is for following it, especially in situations like what's the one we just watched where I couldn't the Q one, that she's not going to deliver a ruling in favor of the Continuum to keep Winnie the Q from being able to kill himself, even though it would have been, an easy ride home for her crew.
Was that a Prime Directive issue though? I think that was just a straight moral choice situation. I think that was a little different. She wasn't wanting to.
Okay, fair enough. But
yeah,
but she has invoked the Prime Directive a lot. And then I was going back and watching some old TNG, and what is it? Is it Times Squared where they've got Max Headroom, and he's the scientist who has come back to observe the Enterprise as it had to deal with some planet's gravity situation. Remember this one?
Oh yeah. That was supposed to be Robin Williams.
I actually just read about that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an episode I remember fondly. But in that episode, even, Picard points out that, he swore to uphold the Prime Directive and that he has on numerous occasions willfully disobeyed it because it was the right thing to do. And I thought that was a very powerful line. And that, interestingly enough, that entire episode is written by Rick Berman. So, I mean, that's really the holy gospel if you were to take that out of an episode. And if Picard is really going to be our exemplar for what a Starfleet captain should be, it's that consciousness, that self-aware instinct that this document at times needs to be disregarded for the greater good in whatever form it's going to take in that moment and be disregarded. And I think that puts even more kind of resentment on my shoulders towards a lot of the times Janeway calls that in, like the time and again, which so the Star Trek shit posting group that we're in on Facebook, right?
Yes.
And I did see that Jason successfully talked one person to potentially giving us a shot. So, dude, if you're out there or anybody else from the shit posting
thank you. Yeah.
And thank you, Jason, for shilling us on there, because there's only so far. Well, I don't think you have any limits, but certainly I have a threshold.
I have no shame. I take my cues from Matt Slayer. Like, don't be ashamed to shill your podcast wherever you possibly can. But Jason Clarke, he went to where no man gone before.
I completely forgot why I brought that up. Oh, some other guy's like, hey, I just started watching Voyager for the first time, and here's some points. And I was like, oh man, I should really throw our name in the hat because I think this would be a good companion as he starts watching these episodes. And I saw his second point on this list of thoughts was Time and Again was a great episode, and I really loved this. I'm like, ooh, maybe we're not going to be a good fit for you, because I think that's one of the ones we poop on the hardest.
Yes, we do. I think deservedly so. Just to return back to what you were saying about the Prime Directive, though, I think that the lack of consistency is what bothers me. Not that Janeway has a specific interpretation that might be different than Picard's, or an understanding that's different than Picard's. I think that'd be interesting if she did. Sisko clearly did. Sisko out and out was willing to do whatever it took to preserve lives in the Alpha Quadrant. He didn't give a fuck. Mm-hmm. If that meant manipulating the Romulans into a bloody war where millions, if not billions, of their people would die for the greater good, then he did it, and he didn't care. That made him an interesting character, and he had a whole evolution that brought him to that point. Awesome. Janeway could have been someone who immediately disregarded the Prime Directive to save the Occupants, because we find out she's deeply compassionate towards other alien races. Maybe she has a kind of an existential problem with the Prime Directive, that she thinks that there's a lot more of that can be done that honors and respects the idea that you're not trying to uplift races, but if you reach a certain technological threshold and you start to be a danger to yourselves, why not intervene and help? Which is actually something that you see sometimes discussed throughout other Trek series. They could have done that, but they don't, because then they return to the idea that my cat's behind me as my wife tries to corral him. Sorry, I hope you guys like cats. Or it could have been that she was just a real stickler and she just had this moment of compassion and she regrets it. That now she's stranded her crew, and now she doesn't know what to do, and she has to work through guilt about it. There's no consistency. She's one moment, fuck the Prime Directive, let's save these people. The other moment is, under no circumstances can we break it, even if there's obviously a good reason for us to do so to help these people. It's not one or the other. It's just whatever the writers decide for that episode. And that fucking sucks.
Again, I think, a big part of this too is just there isn't that clear document. And I think if anybody out there is an aspiring sci-fi writer and you're going to have a Bible that it gets referenced consistently in your property, just take the time, write that Bible out, so any debates to its finer details can be legitimate and uniform from encounter to encounter.
So here's the question. Let's be that writer. Let us try to conceive of the Prime Directive in a way that is the most applicable, both from the idea of what if the Federation was a real thing and they had to have a rule like that, and also what would work for TV. Like, what would be a good rule that would create compelling TV storylines?
Is this a conversation we want to have now, or is this something we should move to the group and text format and give people a chance to discuss and flesh this thing out? Because that's a very big question to ask, I think. What would you not do? What would be your biggest no-no?
I think my biggest no-no would be the idea that just because a civilization has not yet discovered warp drive, it can't be contacted and it can't be assisted in any way. We see, like there are what was it? It's like the third episode. It was Time and Again. I'm sorry. Where they go to the candy corn tragedy planet, and they're using the super dangerous form of power, and they might all murder themselves on accident. And the Prime Directive essentially suggests that the Federation can't be like, hey, what's up, guys? Listen, you're gonna blow yourselves up. We don't want you to do that because you seem like you might be cool dudes. So how about we help you figure out something else? By the way, there are people in space. Also, your outfits are fucking terrible.
The worst.
Like, yeah, the fucking worst. So
we're not actually here really to tell you that you're using death power. We, in addition to boldly going where no one has ever gone before, our intergalactic fashion police, and you guys, this is like a death penalty.
Your like whoever designed your discount Kwanzaa outfits are offending the galaxy.
We are going to require you to surrender the person who made these outfits, and we are going to transport them directly into our newly repurposed holodeck torture hell, where he will burn for the rest of his life slowly in a plasma fire for what he has done to you people.
That'd be my number one thing not to do. It's like that's such a stupid rule, and it makes the Federation seem like they have no compassion. Like, you have to reach an arbitrary level of technological development before these super advanced space peoples will bother to help you. And for all of the lectures about the compassion of humanity and how humanity makes the galaxy a better place, the fact that they have that fucking rule is stupid.
So you're saying it would be okay to initiate first contact out of compassion from time to time, or should the Federation just act as an unseen hand shaping? Or
oh no, tell them they're all about free will. If step in if it looks like they're about to do something that's going to destroy themselves, and be like, just hey, don't do it. Like,
so is any part of that coming from like you remember that movie The Medicine Man with Sean Connery, where they find a cure to cancer? There's a cure to cancer in the rainforest, and some young researchers have to go in and find the old researcher, which is Sean Connery. He's like, been integrated into this tribal society for a while, and he's got all these really cool new medicines that are just natural derivatives. But at the end, deforestation destroys the only place where this particular cure grows, and they lose all of it. Maybe these civilizations that are on the brink of a disaster, an unforeseen disaster, maybe they've got something legitimately good to add to the galactic community, and whether it's on a regular timeline where they're able to achieve warp speed and make first contact on their own, or the Federation stepping in saying, hey, look, you guys are really keen and we'd like you around. Also, I guess your big part of this is pre-Dominion War Federation policy versus after Dominion War policy, where and really the entire Borg threat directive, where it's like, we got to back off the scientific loftiness and start getting into like wartime prep mode, because shit's out there and we're going to need all the help we can get.
I mean, that's part of the plot of Insurrection. It's the beginning of Insurrection, right? That they've gotten so pressed from fighting the Dominion and the Borg that they accept some race into the Federation that's barely able to create warp ships. I mean,
what were they before the Vidians or after the Vidians?
I would have been after the Vidians were introduced, because that movie didn't happen until after First Contact. First Contact didn't happen until I want to say, 5th or 6th season, maybe the middle of the 5th season.
Actually, I think I called out one of these episodes, I had read the star date, put it in canon right up against Insurrection.
It was one of the ones we've already watched was the same date as Generations.
That's right. Yeah.
So we are long before on our journey they would get to Insurrection, because Insurrection, I think, happens during the 7th season of DS9, and they're about in the 3rd or 4th season of DS9 where we are now. So
Jack has an excellent comment out here in the section. Let me go ahead and call out. Had TNG not monkeyed with the first warp flight, recursively violating the Prime Directive on ourselves, we would all be on the wrong side of the Prime Directive. And I think he's referring to First Contact, the movie, the TNG movie.
I mean, he's absolutely correct. That's the violation of the Prime Directive can be very relative.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you are interfering with the timeline, but you're interfering with someone else interfering with the timeline, which made it so that was actually the original timeline. It's that whole temporal paradox stuff at work. But I think there's a case to be made for not getting involved in races that aren't going to be able to deal with or comprehend the idea of spacefaring aliens all over the place.
Let me ask you a question real quick. This just popped in my mind. If the Borg can go back in time, why would they do it right over Earth's atmosphere where all of the Federation starships are watching them go back in time? Why wouldn't they just go back in time, like in their space, and then fly over and nuke Earth?
I created headcanon to explain why, which is that the technology that allows them to travel through time can only be done like on that tiny sphere ship, and that tiny sphere ship doesn't have the capacity to travel all the way from the Delta Quadrant to Earth. So they had to take a cube to get there and then launch the auxiliary vessel because it's shorter range, because of however their time technology works. It doesn't have like the transwarp drive or something like that. Like that there's some technological reason as to why, because otherwise you're absolutely correct. There's no reason why the Federation would ever exist after the first time they resist the Borg, because clearly they would just travel back in time to when they were Stone Age people and mess with it. So
it's kind of the same argument you have to come up with for Terminator, like, well, just go back in time and kill the first caveman or whatever. And
this is why time manipulation plots are difficult to do correctly, because you create these problems for yourself with the paradoxes that they create of like, well, if I have the technology to do that, why don't I just do this in a smarter way? Well, then you wouldn't have a movie. And what fun would that fucking be? Then we wouldn't have cool zero-G fights on the saucer section with Worf going at people with
batleth.
Batleths. It's being metal as fuck. It's awesome.
Star Trek would be a much less dope place without stupid time travel rules.
What is the best use of a time plot in Star Trek?
What's yours?
I was going to say City on the Edge of Forever from TOS. The Guardian of Forever and going back in time to Edith Keeler pre-World War II. That's the most effective use of time travel in Star Trek by far to me. It's also basically the first one.
Let's see what else is a good time travel episode out there. I seem to have very fond memories of the one where they find Data's head in a cave and they have to go back in time and meet Mark Twain.
Time Zero.
I can't speak to the entirety of that episode, but where they finding your own head in a cave because of time travel shenanigans was a really cool way to create a cliffhanger for the end of that episode. All Good Things was an excellent time travel episode. I know you don't want to hear it, but the Discovery episode with Harry Mudd, where Captain Lorca gets murdered about 80 times, I thought that was entertaining.
I actually thought that was the only episode of Discovery that felt like Star Trek.
It was
like that Mudd episode was very self-contained. It had a very Star Trek plot to it. like the whole timeline reset plot idea. Like that was the only episode of Discovery that felt like Star Trek to me. So I
What
did.
appealed to me a lot on that one too was the video game feel that like I'm going to kill all these people in the Skyrim city. There's got to be a way to do it, and I will reload this quick save as many times as it takes to find the magic murder path.
We've got some ideas from chat. Jackie wants us to know that, but the episode with the flute, the Picard's adventure with the God, what was the name of those
The
people?
Inner Light.
The Inner Light.
Yes. Can we count that as time travel?
Ooh.
Because it was them. I would say yes, superficially, very much yes. You're reliving past events that have already taken place, and then effectively traveling back towards the future. Times. I'm sorry, Inner Light's just kind of like one of those cheat buttons you can use just to win any argument because it was just such a good. I'm sorry, what am I even thinking of? I'm gonna have to say unequivocally, my favorite Star Trek time plot is going to be Yesterday's Enterprise.
Oh yeah. That's good. That's a good one.
It's the best, man. I was going through watching it with my wife, and when the Ambassador Class C starts going through the temporal anomaly, and they do the camera warp, and all of a sudden the bridge gets dark, and the collars come up on the uniforms, and everybody's packing a phaser, and boom, there's Yar, and it's just like dark ass shit Federation timeline. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps again, man. It was too good. I have to go. Yeah, Yesterday's Enterprise, 100%.
That I still would put it behind City on the Edge of Forever. Oh God. Hey Stevie, would you find out for us if there's a fan fiction, a Vulcan fan fiction called Picard's Flute?
No, please no.
The flute
My
is
childhood.
his penis.
No.
Peter doesn't want you to do this. That's just to be clear.
Well, it's too late now.
Oh, it's too late. She's looking for it. You're fucked now, man.
Too late as in all the skeevy/fix sites close at 8:00 on the internet, 8:00 Eastern. She has to wait until tomorrow.
It's on it. There's an Urban Dictionary page. So.
Oh, you're in trouble, dude.
Well, if it's an Urban Dictionary, then it's legit. Let's hear it.
But as much as Yesterday's Enterprise is great, I still am sticking with City on the Edge of Forever. There's a possible time paradox, and it's a very small story, and it becomes a very big story, and Kirk is left with a terrible choice at the end. Like it's got a symmetry to it that's beautiful. But Yesterday's Enterprise is a good second choice, particularly because of Picard's eventual realization of what's going on and how that plays out. Yes, darling.
So he uses the flute in a couple of bad, horrible fanfics, but there is not one actually named Picard's flute.
Good. There is a god.
We don't know how he uses it. He might use it in the same way that Bill Clinton did. Beware. You're not out of the woods yet.
Can we please have somebody out there cover Picard playing the flute with the jazz flute from Anchorman, please?
Some sort of little video.
Yeah.
Where someone he starts to pick it up and is real mournful,
or if you're
real really quiet, and then all of a sudden it's just the jazz flute interlude from Anchorman. Yeah, I like that.
Or if you're really good, Photoshop the head of Picard over Will Ferrell's body in that scene, just so that it's like the moving scene, but it's Picard's head, so it's like him playing it.
It seems like this would ruin Peter's day, so I like it.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
So I think there's some really good time travel episodes out there, and then there's all the Voyager ones.
We've got a couple other votes, which I think are worthy of mentioning here in the chat. We've got Far Beyond the Stars and DS9. Is that actually time travel? I agree with you, Mike. That is not. That is sort of an alternate dimension, not really time travel. I will say to Truman, Voyager has one good time travel plot. It's probably its two best episodes. You know what one I'm talking about. Peter, you may have heard of it, called The Year of Hell.
Yeah, we talked about that briefly because that's one of the ones I'd caught off, and it seemed conceptually really cool and a great kind of micro examination of why why, the forced ramrod approach of, if you don't get it right this time, just go back a second, try again.
There's a lot going on with that whole plot that I would consider that the Voyager movie, I guess, would be the best way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great 2-part story, and it's an effective time story because it talks about time travel in a very meta way that, like you said, explores why the things that we think of why not just do it this way might not work, which is pretty cool how they go in depth on that. And then Kirkwood Smith is the villain. He's nothing kind of like having Clarence Boddicker as your bad guy in Star Trek.
Leave.
Exactly. I'm gonna have that ready for a fucking sound effect when we do that shit.
I like it. Talking about technology and stuff as it's cropped up along the way, something I've thought a couple of times about, and especially in the discussions with the Prime Directive and contact with pre-warp civilizations and avoiding first contact situations. How many if Janeway wanted to create a cloaking device for the ship, do you think they would be able to do it? I mean, they've got replicators, and they have to have very intricate details on how these cloaks work. I mean, if they really wanted, just build a basic Romulan cloaking device for Voyager and stave off roughly 2/3 of all the plots that they encounter? Plots being terrible disasters. Like, what are the Kazon going to do against a cloak?
You're absolutely right. I never thought of that, but yeah, I mean, wow. So yeah, they should be able to do that. You would think that a cloaking device, given that it's pretty old technology, you're talking about technology that's a century old.
Yes.
At that point, that they would be able to recreate some kind of cloaking device. The only thing that restrains the Federation in using them are treaties that they've signed. So what would prevent Voyager from being on the ass in a Delta Quadrant? Be like, we got to improvise if we're going to get home. We don't have a treaty with any of these fucking people. We've never encountered it before. So let's.
That would have been the perfect conversation to have in alliances, and that's the episode we just watched where Chakotay and the Maquis convince Janeway to start considering going into alliances with the Kazon, and of course they go with the Trabe instead. But if your goal is to go from point A to point B with as little firefights as possible, I think there should have been a real serious discussion because, yeah, what do you got? A treaty keeping you from doing it. And so I think at the end of it, you can take Janeway out of the treaty areas, but you can't take the treaties out of Janeway.
It would have been at least interesting to introduce the idea and what the response would have been. I guess really the answer to that is because it would be bad TV.
Well, let's
you want Voyager to stumble into shit all the time, so you're just not even going to bother.
What's the right way to do it? I would say to have them, try and use a cloak and to fly through someone's zone, and now they are able to detect you, and they see a cloaked warship from next door that already has a bad rep blowing through, and they're like, "Hey, we know you're there, and it looks like you're on a stealth run to go nuke our homeworld with your Cardassian super smart torpedo gun." And next door is writing "fuck you," and then they'll be like, "Oh wait, this does look really shady. We shouldn't be using this because it's technology for whatever reason we can't perfect, and we're gonna back off it." But I think that would have been the right argument for the Maquis to have: is look, you don't want to pair up with these guys. Let's use all these dirty tricks we know from the Alpha Quadrant and make it go.
Yeah, I buy that as an explanation of how they could have explored not to do it. At the same time, they could have developed as like a tactical option. They don't have to be running silent all the time, but if they get into scrapes and they don't want to fight, nothing quite like being invisible and then being like, all right, we're out of here. Peace.
There you go.
Look, it's the Vidians. Fuck those guys. Let's go. Like, oh, I don't want to get my fucking liver ripped out of my body. So I guess we'll just be invisible to the organ thieves and we'll leave.
Good point by Jack there. Aside from treaties, weren't there some health side effects? Running a cloak for 70 years might not be a good idea.
Well, Jack is keyed into medical issues, and I understand they have that. I don't think that
I
they
believe
ever
I saw a
they ever
commercial
affected.
that very specifically said that prolonged use to Romulan-style cloaking devices has been clinically proven to lead to mesothelioma. And if you have been the subject of one of these cloaking device incidents, that you should call this lawyer.
That's actually really fucking funny. Is
Yeah.
that like something you saw like as a YouTube clip?
I just made that up in my head.
Oh.
With some help from Jack's health concern thing in there, but
I'm
maybe
sorry,
that should be
I
our
killed that joke dead. I apologize.
that can be our advertisement reel for other
Good
podcasts.
idea. Yes.
Advertisement for punitive damages for mesothelioma. The M word.
You can't even repeat it now. I've done that to you.
It's a hard one. It's a big one.
If your cloak lasts for more than 4 hours, call a doctor.
That's why the cloaking device ruins everybody's boner. And when you're out stuck in the middle of the Delta Quadrant with nothing but Tom Paris's fuck farm, that's no bueno. No boner, no bueno.
Speaking of Tom Paris's fuck farm, I have a few more hot takes. We're almost to an hour already, so we may leave with this topic. But one thing that they never do talk about in much depth, aside from those first season episodes, is this is a small ship. There's only 140 people on it. There's not a lot to do. And we already know the 24th century is a pretty libertine place when it comes to people's sexual mores, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There should be a lot more like pairing up, babies being born, results of fucking, basically. And there just aren't. Like, they never really go down this road of like the consequences of this small amount of people cohabitating for that long.
You just said it. Going down. You can't get pregnant from mouth babies. Janeway Chakotay put a strict is that second base?
Second base rule? Yeah.
Third base sends you to the brig, and that's
you commit treason, you steal technology, stern talking to. You steal shuttlecraft to go on a suicide run, you get put on report. You shove the first officer, or you go to third base with the Delaney sisters, and your ass is going
crack
to
someone in the back of the head with a pipe.
Okay. Or murder. Or murder.
Penetration is as bad as murder on Voyager.
I mean, I completely understand that there's the reason why they don't go down the road too explicitly is because it's a family show. Very true, Calberth. But I think that there was still room to explore it in a family-friendly way of the consequences of people pairing off, and maybe there's not someone for everyone, and isolation. They do an episode of this on Enterprise, of all shows. You go forward in time to a version of the ship where essentially that happened. I don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole, but I think that they could have done more of that, or at least showed like what it would have been like to be on the ship and just be bored. Like they hit on this idea that Tom's going to set up a gambling ring on replicator rations because there's suddenly currency on the ship, right?
That's I want to talk about. That's one of my talking points. Like, what a great, and it obviously the replicator discussion is something that I followed very closely, but really just stop and think about it. Replicator rations aren't just like, here's some food you want. I mean, as we saw in Kess's birthday episode, it's anything you want. You want a gold watch, you want a diamond ring, you want anything. Like, the Federation is filthy rich, right? Because anybody can have anything anytime they want it. Replicators and transporters give everybody just the most luxurious life possible. They'll get bored with it, and you don't see people flash and stuff. But at its core, replicator rations are magical wishes. And he's created a lottery for magical wishes to have whatever his heart could possibly desire.
I mean, they have so many places they could have gone down with there's currency, there's a limited amount of magical space juice that you're used to having an unlimited amount of to be comfortable. You obviously have none of your personal possessions that you left in the Alpha Quadrant, and you probably never see them again. There could have been more trading, more bartering, more personal interactions, more consequences of people setting up a black market, something. I don't know, like, or just the idea that people are bored and they need something to do, they need something to focus on, and like they don't really go down those roads very much, except to give themselves an excuse to do stupid holodeck episodes. The worst ones in all of Star Trek, the Fairhaven episodes. Peter, I know we obviously have Threshold on the docket for you and I. We get together once you guys are settled in and all that stuff, and really like treat that one with the poop carpet, right? Really roll it out. But the Fairhaven episodes might be like worse watches, because I guarantee you, when we sit down, we watch Threshold, and we take that bitch apart, it's actually going to be fun for us because it's that kind of bad. Fairhaven, that's just a different kind of bad. It's the joyless bad. It's kind of bad that makes you wonder about what we're doing with our hobby.
Well, that's going to be our question for our hobby. It'll be a even more vicious question to ask for what all those people do with their careers. I think we're pushing up on an hour here. I know we've got a couple of other topics we wanted to discuss internally. I think we can very easily roll that in for our rip of season 2 once we hit the season finale there. Anybody out in the chat room got any parting words or questions, comments, or things you want to see make their way onto the air?
Yeah, please let us know. We certainly appreciate those of you that decided to join us live, and for those that will hear the replay, we actually have an episode ready, a normal episode ready for this week on Thursday. I'll end up posting this up to our podcast feeds as something special, as something extra. We won't take a week off. We'll save that for when we're actually done with the season. So don't worry, this wasn't done in lieu of an episode on Thursday. It was done as in addition. An extra. So we appreciate you coming along. And if you have anything to add in our chat here, or if you have anything that you want to add to our Voyager Please Trauma Support Group, we always love to hear from you. We love the interaction. It makes doing the show fun. So please do. And let us know if you enjoyed this. If you did, we'll try and squeeze in a few more. Peter and I are such nerds that we'll take any opportunity to talk about Star Trek in front of other people. I don't know what that says about us, but it's true.
Says we're married and we don't have to worry about that dating game anymore.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's awesome. I could drag my wife along with me, and then she gets her revenge by telling me about all the fan fiction. Yeah, it's not good.
I guess it's better Vulcans than like a Talaxian.
Don't give her any ideas. She's listening, dude. Shut your fucking mouth.
Speaking of Talaxians, we got a request to write the new Jack Neelix Bible, WWNJND. Maybe we might have to crowdsource that. We get a Google Doc up and try and whittle it down to the most realist of real Talaxian Delta Quadrant survival tips.
There you go. Yeah. I like that. And we can share one at the end of each episode, or like something new Jack Neelix would have done to improve the episode. There's avenues here. We're going to follow.
There's a lot of bad ways we can go with a new Jack Neelix decision tree in regards to things that's okay to date based on the fact he's got a 2-year-old relationship. I'm going to go ahead and veto anything in there about grass on the field and playing. All right, guys, we got to keep this somewhat clean.
And on that note, thank you for joining us for this Voyager Please live stream. We'll catch you next time. Peace.